Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am really excited to be bringing us a conversation today on exploring embodied sexual safety with Tara Teng. My guest here today, Tara, is an embodiment coach who works in the intersections of spirituality and sexuality. She helps people find their way back to their bodies, to overcome shame, to heal trauma, and dismantle purity culture in a way that's in alignment with our deepest values and beliefs so that we can build a healthy sexual ethic that's proactive and thrive in freedom and wholeness. Tara, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I'm excited to have this conversation. It's so juicy and it's so important.
It really is. A lot of people tuning in today, we come from, some kind of a spiritual or religious background. Often it's evangelical expressions of
Mhm.
Christianity. And I believe that's part of your background as well. And, I don't know about you, but what I was taught about sexuality was a lot of abdicating my own initiative. It was either to, not have sex at all, sexual connection at all, until certain conditions were met, such as heterosexual monogamous marriage. And
Totally.
and even in that, there was often, a lot of prescribed do's and don'ts that,
Yeah.
allegedly came from the Bible, but more often came from the interpretive communities that were, putting these rules and regulations on people. And so, what I find is that a lot of us who are coming out of that more fundamentalist religious context, regardless of where we're moving toward, we're wanting to get in touch with our own internal GPS, so to speak, like our
Yeah.
own internal guidance system in a way that still honors the divine, but in a more
Mhm.
co-creative role that emphasizes our own, what I would call God-given agency to discern
Mhm.
for myself and what the most loving and proactive way is to engage with others. But I find there's a lot of lack of safety and uncertainty that can come initially, whether it's the purity culture background that we had and maybe primary or secondary sexual trauma that comes from that purity culture, or sexual
Mhm.
trauma that comes from unwanted sexual experiences that we may have had. And I know that you speak to a lot of this. So would love to hear from you about why embodied safety is so important for us.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. I mean, I think for a lot of these communities and us collectively, personally, when we're healing from religious trauma, purity culture, like you said, even like experiencing unwanted sexual experiences, sexual violence, sexual abuse, sexual harm, right? Like there's so much of we want to be in this place where we have a holistic sexual experience, a holistic sexuality, right? We want to have this healing. We want sexual liberation. And I think that when we hear that sometimes it can sound so either intangible or scary or like, oh, it's sexual liberation is just like this, like no boundaries, free for all. But really, I've actually found it's the complete opposite. I have found that when we're actually talking about sexual liberation, we need embodied safety in our sex and sexuality first. If we're not being safe and there's not mutual flourishing, but like deep embodied holistic care for the individual, then we're not going to be able to be our freest, most expressive selves. And so this is this cornerstone, this is the foundation of how we actually can get to expressing, experiencing, and embodied our sexuality in a really liberated and flourishing way. So it's the good stuff. It's the juicy stuff, these like glimmers that make life exciting and enjoyable, that bring us into these moments of ecstasy in our bodies and in our relationships. And I remember like while I was deep in purity culture in my teenage and young adult years, so when I was a teenager, deep in purity culture, the little bits of sex education that I was able to access from places even like Cosmo magazine, they were all focused on either fear-based or it was focused on technique. When in the reality is that if we want to experience really juicy, connected, orgasmic, mind-blowing sexual experiences, whether with ourselves or with another person, it's actually about connection.
Hmm.
Connection to yourself, connection to your partner. And in order to receive really beautiful connective experiences, we need to focus on all of the ways that we are disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from each other. So many of us aren't living present in our bodies. We're living up in our heads. And this can so easily extend into our sexual experiences in the bedroom as well, too. So often when I'm working one-on-one with clients, we have things like performance anxiety that pops up. We have things like comparison that pop up all the time. So how can we actually stay present in the moment in our bodies, having beautiful connection with ourselves and one another, and not just staying up in our head overthinking things all the time? That disconnection is what creates disembodiment. And that disconnection happens when we have a significant or ongoing lack of safety. So this embodied safety in our sex and our sexuality is our most fundamental human need, to be safe. Our bodies are driven by this need more than anything else in our human experience, because our bodies are always working for our survival.
So let me ask you this. I think that for those of us who grew up sheltered, what was allegedly being provided to us by our religious context was this sort of externally driven safety of what would allegedly keep us out of sexual trouble. And by contrast, what we thought of in, say, the Cosmo magazines or in the Playboys or in the world, quote unquote, was actually sexuality as risk, sexuality as danger. Like it was sort of shown to be exciting. So I don't think for a lot of us, like former fundamentalists, thinking of sexual safety is and juiciness come on the same page. So where does risk and extension come in sexuality? And then how does that play into the safety that you're talking about?
Oh, so good. When I am grounded in safety, where I'm safe to be vulnerable, when I'm safe to share things like, oh, these are my desires, my fantasies, maybe taboos that I want to explore that might feel risky, but are exciting. To be able to access those parts, we need to have a level of safety where we feel safe enough to explore these things, safe enough to ask for these things, safe enough to voice these wants, fantasies, needs, desires, right? And it goes on both ways too. We also need to have the safety to be able to say, hey, these are also my boundaries. This is what I want, and this is what I don't want. And to not feel repercussion on either side, to be shut down or rejected because there's this one kink that I have that maybe someone says is too weird. And also this need that I have in order to show up as my safest, most authentic, most embodied, most freest self. I actually need to have certain parameters around that so that I feel safe to not feel ridiculed, rejected, abandoned, or any other feeling that might creep in. Right. And so this embodied safety is so important because it opens us up to more presence. It opens us up to more softness. We need to be able to let down our armor to be able to receive more pleasure, to be able to open ourselves up to receive. This is huge. And physically, it opens our bodies up more when we bring more ease, when we slow down, right? If we are living in a busy day-to-day, hyper-vigilant all the time, rushing from one thing to another, it's so hard for so many of us to switch on instantly and just like get our engines revving, be ready to go, right? So many people I hear all the time when I'm working with clients or when I'm doing workshops or different facilitations, we'll talk about how it's so hard to go from our busy work schedule or our to-do list in our day-to-day life and instantly feel like we need to turn it on when we want to be sexual with ourselves or with our partner, right? And so when we're chronically stressed out and we're in this hypervigilant state, or maybe our bodies are stuck in fight, fright, freeze, or fawn, we're holding on to that tension, even physically in our bodies. If we look at our whole pelvic muscles, does not matter what your gender or your sex or sexual orientation or your sexual identity is, we all have pelvic muscles in our body and they can hold hypertension, and most of the time they do. It's actually really interesting. Before I started working as a somatic practitioner, I was a birth worker, and so I work in partnership with a lot of pelvic physiotherapists. And so they're dealing with things like vaginismus and vulvodynia and erectile dysfunctions and all of these different things that are caused by holding chronic stress in the body. And one of the things that they were noticing, that I notice as well too with the clients that I'm working with that are healing from purity culture ideologies, is that those of us who grew up in high control religion, fundamentalism, purity culture, we tend to have higher rates of sexual dysfunction. There tends to be higher rates of things like vaginismus, because when you've been taught for so long to put on the armor of God and to flee from sexual immorality, you start to view these things as a threat. Your body starts to actually physically have a response to that. And we can see that in the pelvic bowl, in your hips. We can see that in all the muscles that are holding everything in your pelvic muscle patterns. And so things like breath work can be so helpful to have us come back into our bodies, out of our heads, open up for more presence, more ease. For myself, as somebody who was assigned female at birth, who has a vulva, who has a vagina, when I breathe properly, I actually open up these muscles in my body that create more space and let go of that tension. This is not only just good for establishing embodied safety in my body, but from a physical perspective, I'm now opening up to have more blood flow in the area, to release tension, and to drop deeper into my body through embodiment and reconnection. And so this is what we're looking for. We're looking for that reconnection with our embodiment, living present in the moment, present in our bodies. And that is the pinnacle of embodied safety.
Hmm. I love that. All post-purity culture aside, it sounds like what you're saying is that, often I think when we're thinking about, well, how do I have an active, robust sex life on top of my busy day-to-day life? It might be about, well, how do I, pile more on? How do I speed things up? How do I get in there? And what I hear you saying is, yeah, it's about actually slowing down. And it reminds me of what a sexuality teacher I appreciate said, that it's about letting in more sensation rather than increasing stimulation. That,
Yes.
more stimulation could eventually come, but it's about actually letting in more, even just the subtlety of like, what does it feel like to feel my own skin? And can I just
Yes.
in that sense of
Absolutely.
intimacy?
And for those of us who have been so disconnected from our bodies for so long, we're not receiving that sensation, right? So having a relationship with our sensuality, even in a platonic, non-sexual sense, like how does the food taste that you're eating? Like you said, how does it feel to put just lotion on your skin, right? Like how does your arm feel? How do your fingertips feel in your hands? All of these things, right?
Yeah.
So many of us are not connected to our sensations, and then we're not able to receive more pleasure because we're so numb to every part of our body altogether, right? So resensitizing our body is such a big piece in coming back into our embodiment and that embodied safety, and starting off in something that feels very non-sexual and non-threatening for somebody who has a lot of this sexual trauma that they're working through. That's a beautiful place to start.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned breath work a moment ago. Is there something that you could
Mhm.
lead us in, or just outline how we might in our own time use breath work to be more in touch with sensation in ourselves?
Yeah. Do you want to do one together real quick right now in real time?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay, so let's do that. So for you and for anybody else who is watching this afterwards, feel free to participate as much or as little as feels right to you. We only go where the body gives full consent. And remember that your no is as sexy as your yes. So please participate as much or as little as feels right to you. So if it feels good to you and if it feels safe enough to you, feel free to close your eyes. Otherwise, you can just softly rest your gaze somewhere in front of you. And we want to take a minute to drop out of our heads and into our bodies. You can notice your breath, if that feels right. Are you having slow, shallow breaths in your chest? Are you able to drop deeper with each breath and sink into your rib cage? Can you drop deeper with your next breath and release all the tension in your belly? So many of us are sucking in our bellies all day long, being told by messages that we receive all around us to be smaller, to be tighter, and hold it all in. And so much tension is being held there. If you can notice this, notice a softening in your belly, notice a release, notice anywhere you're holding onto the tension, notice anywhere you feel openness. Can you drop your breath all the way down into your belly? And with your next breath, if you can drop even deeper, can you drop all the way down into your hips? Bring warmth and flow and openness and connection into your pelvic bowl. Notice anywhere again that you feel tension or openness, sensation of any kind. Sometimes you may find that as you breathe and connect with these different parts of yourself, you notice colors, sensation, maybe intuitive messages. And it's okay if you feel numbness. Lack of sensation is also a sensation and not something for us to be discouraged by. We connect through this breath work not to fix anything, but simply to notice and to be with, to bring presence to. Take one more deep breath. Let it all release. And when you're ready, you can come back together. Slowly open your eyes when you're ready and return to this moment. How was that experience for you? Did you notice anything?
Mhm. Yeah, I noticed that I must have been holding myself in such a way as to not be aware of this like dull aching pain in my lower left shoulder blade. I like
Yeah.
myself earlier this week working out somehow. I don't even know how.
Okay. Yeah.
And I already went to the chiropractor this morning, but then it was like, whew, all this came up. And it's like, oh, it's letting in more
Mm-hmm.
sensation. Like, this isn't pleasant. I know why
Yeah.
I might numb out because I'm trying to like
Mm-hmm.
protect myself from what doesn't feel good.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And that's how we experience trauma as well,
I was gonna
right?
say, yeah, it's a good segue because
It's a great, yeah, it's
yeah,
so relevant.
yeah, as we are attempting to be more in touch with sensation and more intention touch
Mhm.
with grounding of our embodied safety, we might run across these tripwires in ourselves, these very
Mhm.
intentional traps that were laid not for our harm, but to,
Mhm.
keep us safe. And so when we talk a little bit about trauma, I feel like
Yeah.
trauma went from being one of those things that was never
Mhm.
discussed to now being like almost a buzzword, but there are lots of different understandings floating around out there. So, in context of what we're
Yeah.
talking about today, how does trauma show up? How do we be with it in a way that allows us to
Yeah.
more embodied sexual safety?
Absolutely. Trauma is anything that happens in our body when we feel unsafe. It's not what happened to you, as Dr. Gabor Mate says, it's what happened within you when what happened to you was happening. Right. And so it doesn't have to make sense or be justified or validated by anybody else. If it's something that you experience through your own lived experience, that is trauma. And so we immediately, when we feel unsafe, will go to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we often disconnect ourselves from our bodies because it feels like too much to live in our bodies, exactly what you're describing here. It can be as simple as this pain that we have physically in your lower shoulder. And so we don't want to feel that. So we distance ourselves from being present in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so what happens here, it's part of your autonomic nervous system. You can't control it. Our bodies flip into this alarm system immediately without us choosing to do so. It kicks on and it alerts us of danger. And anytime our body feels threatened, right? Our bodies are so incredibly wise. We think that we live in these very modern bodies, right? Here and today in 2023, we're living in such advanced, progressive, modern bodies, but really our bodies are still deeply ancient and deeply primal. And so every time you walk into any room, whether that be a virtual room, whether that be in an in-person room with other humans or other beings, you walk in and you're immediately going to be scanning the room. Who is here? What's going on? That's why we hear things like, oh, the vibe is off, right? Like that's a real thing that's happening in your body. And whenever your body picks on something that might be dangerous, it kicks into that survival mode and it chooses whatever survival tactic, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, that it determines it will be most successful for whatever it is at hand. So, one of the things, for example, to make it really personal to what we're talking about today, what we might see as somebody who grew up in purity culture or high control religion, we might go into freeze, right? We just shut down. We've been taught to shut down our sexuality, shut down our bodies. We might go immediately into fawn as well too. And I see this a lot with, especially with people who are assigned female at birth or socialized as a girl, right? We learn how to talk our way out of scenarios that feel unsafe to us. And this can look like over time a pattern of things like people pleasing, of not feeling like we can embody our voice or speak up for ourselves, but feeling like we need to agree with whatever is being expected of us or told to us, right? For any of us who grew up in high control religion, we were taught to abdicate our own discernment to just listen to the wisdom of those who are in authority over us. We start to see this pattern of freezing or fawning a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
And neuroception is what happens when our bodies are stuck in that trauma response long after the threat has passed. And so this is why perhaps one of the number one reasons why people seek me out to work with me is they're maybe no longer living in high control religion. They're no longer living in purity culture. They don't even believe in these purity culture ideals anymore. They've done the deconstruction work and they don't believe in them. It doesn't line up with their values, but still, in their body, their nervous systems are responding a certain way and goes into shutdown every time they try to be intimate with themselves or with a partner. They can even have the safest, kindest, most gentle and compassionate partner that they are married to or not married to. They love this person and feel so safe with them, but still their body responds in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and they go into a panic attack anytime that they want to be sexual.
Yeah, it's so neuroception is like that U2 song, we're stuck in a moment that we can't get out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so healing is now coming back to all these parts of ourselves that we lost through self-abandonment in our pursuit of feeling safe, of receiving love, belonging, acceptance by our communities, maybe by our churches, by in our relationships, all of these things. And so in order to heal, we need to get curious about the stories that our nervous systems are holding on to. Where have we adopted or assimilated ourselves in order to avoid more pain? What are our triggers speaking to us about the places that we have resistance to going back to because we don't want to experience more harm? Right? How does our trauma show us the places that we have disconnected from ourselves and our authenticity in order to not disconnect from the people or relationships that we want to keep? Right? Those trauma, that disconnection to self, it changes us. We've already talked about how it physically changes our muscle patterns. But the beautiful thing is that healing does too. Healing has the same way of opening up all of these parts of ourselves that have been closed off. And so we need to get curious of what our body is holding on to, because our nervous systems will always tell us the truth about our lives. When we're activated and defensive, we're conditioned to return to those certain behaviors, right? And so using the somatic skills of noticing our bodies, just like we did just through the breath work, that's one beautiful pathway into the somatic skill of noticing what's happening in your inner world, in your body. Learning to build that window of tolerance to sit with the hard, uncomfortable things that we find so that we can listen to our triggers and not continuously repeat these patterns that we're getting stuck in. Learning what our body is trying to communicate to us is how we begin to heal. And we start to do that simply by coming back.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, Tara, is that trauma is anything that happens inside of us that has us frozen, stuck, immobilized, in a way of maybe like crystallizing the pain in our bodies. And how we heal that is neither by ignoring it, which is what we might by default do if we're just not aware that that's what's happening. Just like I wasn't acutely aware of my shoulder pain until you let us do lovely breath work. but nor is it like attempting to power through, nor is it like, oh, not my
Mm-mm.
trauma, God, I've got to get rid of that, I've got to, plow
Right.
through. It's a way of lightly holding, of being curious, and it sounds like even being loving
Mhm.
to those parts of us
Mhm.
that are storing this energy inside of us, saying, oh wow, like what have you had to deal with, and what is it, how
Yeah.
is this really landing in my body, how are you protecting me? And it sounds like
Mhm.
a slow unwinding of the process rather than a
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful way of describing it, right? Because, like, that is the good stuff. That is that juicy, really orgasmic, mind blowing connection that I think all of us are deeply craving.
Mm,
Right? But we have been so fearful of being vulnerable, of letting people see that really tender part of us, right? And so this is why, in order to open up and receive more pleasure, to have more mind-blowing sex and sexual experiences and being in our bodies, we have to go through this to be able to be soft and vulnerable, to take our armor off, to look at the things that are hard to look at,
mm,
and to be able to have that really honest connection with another person. Like, isn't that the thing that we're all really after, right? Allowing yourself to be truly naked in front of another person or in front of yourself. Like, that might even be the even more vulnerable thing, to be truly naked in front of yourself, to physically look at your body in the mirror and strip away all the sex negative,
mm,
body oppressive conditioning that we're holding on to, the lies that we've been told that create shame in our bodies, or the things that we hold on to on an emotional level that make us feel like we're not going to be truly seen or loved, or that we can't possibly let someone know the depths of the tenderness of who we are. Right. And so the more that we heal ourselves in these ways, through presence, through embodiment, through pleasure, the more embodied and expressive and liberated we're able to be. The more embodied we are, the more we are unwilling to return to those places of self abandonment and confinement
mm,
and shame. I know I'm at a place now where I will no longer remain in places where my full and authentic expression is not welcome and celebrated loudly. Celebrated loudly. And this, so the safer I feel in those relationships, the more liberated I'm able to be. And in more liberated I am, the more able I am to soften, to receive, to express, to take charge, to let go, to play. Right? In short, like, the safer and more embodied and more inhibited I am in my own every type of relationship, but definitely in my sexual relationship, honestly, like, from other people's perspective, maybe the nastier I get, but the more fun that I can have, because I'm able to express that without fear of shame or judgment or rejection. I can bring my fullest, most authentic self into every aspect of that sexual container, because I trust myself, or I trust that person that I am building that connection with.
mhm. Yeah, I think that's so important. And it reminds me what you were saying earlier about the possibility of getting even like physically naked before ourselves or
Mhm.
others, and just looking, just seeing. um,
Mhm.
it reminds me just how much, not only high control religion creates a certain lens and a filter through which to see our bodies and sexuality through, but even consumer culture with its creation of these,
Mhm.
airbrushed, idealized images. And so much so that our actual incarnational selves often feel like they're falling short by contrast.
Yeah.
But it can be really powerful. Like I even recall some platonic settings I've been in where group nudity is a part of like a rites of passage, for instance, work
Mhm.
where, I'm standing around with other, assigned male at birth folks, and just
Mhm.
in bodies of all ages, of all shapes,
Right?
and how powerfully normalizing it is of my body, of their bodies. And then we're,
Mhm.
in this sort of ritual context that, could sound
Mhm.
weird if you're listening to this being like, whoa, what are you talking about? But like, no, it powerfully decouples the sort of aesthetics of commercialism, as well as the sort of shame mechanism, both of which,
Yeah.
kind of are like a 1-2 punch. for what
Yeah,
allows us to truly be vulnerable. So that's beautiful what you're saying about,
I love that.
yeah, you want your places that you feel that you're in most intimate connection with, sexual or not, to be places where the whole of you is welcome and seen. And that can be such a powerful
Yeah.
reframing of what is acceptable and celebratory.
Yeah. And I think to that point of yours, like just peeling back those expectations, right? That can then move us into that performative space, right? Oh, if you're assigned male at birth, you have to be dominant and you have to be hyper masculine, right? And then, well, can you allow your own innate femininity as well, like, be expressed, right? Even if you're assigned male at birth, like, and you have a lot of masculine energy, can you bring softness in? What does that look like for you? Because we all experience these things differently, right? Likewise, like the messages and the power dynamics that we get that exist in the world, that exist in the structure of the world that we live in, right? It can move us through play, through expression, through experimentation, into self-discovery. We can explore all of these other parts of ourselves that often we're not able to express in our day-to-day, right? And to have that embodied safety in that space means we can move out of those toxic messages that we've all grown up in that are saying things like, oh, well, guys are only after one thing, right? And so if you allow yourself to express sexually with another person, then we have the fear that, like, well, they're only after one thing, well, then they're going to leave me and they're going to abandon me, right? And so we have all of these responses that we live through as a result of these messages that we've received based on these power dynamics. And when we're actually having authentic connection, authentic embodiment through the container of embodied safety, well, then those things aren't things that we have to fear anymore because we're dismantling them within ourselves and within our relationships.
Mm, yeah, that's so good, Tara. So good. So what are like some of the somatic skills of
Mm,
noticing and listening to our triggers that we can do both solo or maybe like interoception within
mm,
ourselves, but also when it feels good and safe, like with other people, with like potential partner exercises. Do you have any ideas about those?
mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, noticing when your triggers are popping up is so important. And, this is why a lot of the time, from a really trauma-informed perspective, we can communicate those things to new partners that we're engaging in our life. Hey, look, like I've got these things in my past that I've lived through. You want to create that safe enough space to have those conversations where we can be really raw and authentic and honest with the people that we are engaging with, right? Talk about these triggers if you know about what they are, or just simply notice when they pop up in your body. If you're trying to be intimate with somebody and you're trying to engage sexually with yourself or another person and a trigger pops up, maybe we look at that curiously. Maybe we take a step back. This is something that I do with my clients all the time. When a trigger pops up, we take a step back. It does not mean we're going to push forward in the name of healing, right? Just like you said, like we all want to get to that place where like we've arrived, we're healed, we're good, right? We're able to have juicy, authentic, like deeply connected, like mind-blowing sex, right? We all want that,
I
but
do.
we don't push, right? But we don't push forward past our bodies saying, no, thank you right now, right? We take a step back and we go, huh, okay, why is this happening? Why is my body giving me this response where I'm going into a panic attack, where my body is shutting down? I notice myself going into freeze, right? We step back and we notice what's happening. This is where really practical skills like from the BDSM community, there's a beautiful practice of aftercare. When a trigger pops up, we immediately switch into aftercare, for example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means like we're going to step back from anything sexual that's happening. We're going to talk about it, talk about what's happening. Do you need a glass of water? Do you need to go have a snack? Do we need to have something to cool down or warm up? Do you need a cozy blanket right now? If a trigger pops up, we immediately stop what's happening and we go into an aftercare setting. But to set the stage, we actually have more than just aftercare. We have pre-care, we have during. So during, you're checking in with yourself, you're checking in with your person that you're with, right? How is this feeling for you? Are you good? Are you both still present in the moment? Is somebody up in their head, or has somebody left their body? Right? Having that during care helps us stay on track, that we can really have a great, amazing experience, because we're both enjoying enthusiastically what is happening, and we're both checking in with ourselves and each other to ensure that there's mutual care and mutual flourishing, so that we both have mutual pleasure and joy. Right? And the pre-care is also having that conversation. If you know what your triggers are ahead of time, you can have that conversation. You can say, hey, this is something that I've lived through. It sometimes pops up. It sometimes doesn't. I just want you to be aware. And also it gives you the opportunity to talk about, these are my yeses. These are my green lights, the things I want, I desire, my turn-ons, my kinks, the things that I want to explore and play with. And these are the things also that are my no's, that I'm not interested in exploring. Maybe not right now, maybe not ever. We don't have to do that in a way that is shaming anybody, but it's really important to have that safe space to communicate. And so these are things that you want to bring into all of your sexual experiences, whether you're playing with just yourself or with another person. And I do like to have to refer to it as play, like invite in more play. Sex is one of the biggest ways that adults play. We don't have a lot of places in our world where we get to just play and bring in that silliness and bring in that discovery, that expression, that's fun, right? Don't forget the power of the playfulness, of your playfulness in your day-to-day, where we can make more room for joy, silliness, playfulness, pleasure, fun, like it should be fun. And that should translate to more pleasure and more eroticism as well, too.
Absolutely. I think that, for a lot of us that grew up in high control religious environments, we don't think of ideas like erotic innocence or erotic play, but
Mhm.
sense of wonder and joy that, yeah, we often think of it as very serious business. We got to be sexy.
Right? And that's so deeply healing, that it can be erotic innocence, that this is something that isn't, it doesn't have to be like inherently dark or taboo, or I know, like it can be a place where you can explore the full spectrum of your humanity.
Hmm.
Right? Because your whole self is welcome in this place. And that only happens when you have the embodied safety to express the full spectrum of your humanity in a container where you know you're not going to be shamed, judged, or ridiculed, but you're going to be celebrated for exactly who you are.
So good, Tara. So, so,
Mhm.
so as we're, sitting with all of this, we're wanting to, reclaim our own sexuality. We're wanting
Mhm.
to embrace the trauma and even play through the trauma. We're wanting to, establish that nervous system safety. What are some practical ways on a daily basis that we can signal the safety to our nervous system, both in,
Yeah.
explicitly erotic context and even just in a day-to-day context for our lives?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. It's so practical, so tangible, right? And so one of the best ways that we can signal safety to our nervous system is to slow right down. Remove everything in your schedule that is not necessary. So many of us are doing too much. We are doing too much. We are trying to do all of the things, and it is leading to burnout. And when we are chronically stressed, when we're highly anxious, when we're deeply depressed, what is the first thing to go? Our libido,
Mhm.
right? Because you're so burned out for doing everything else that your body has actually kicked into survival mode. And when you are in survival mode, you're not operating out of abundance, you're operating out of scarcity, right? And so when you think of like fertility, you think of your high libido, you think of this like juicy or just really erotic energy. That happens when you have abundance, when you're not in survival mode. When you're in survival mode, you're definitely no creature, animal, or person is wanting to procreate when you're in survival mode. So all of that libido gets shut down. If you want that juiciness, slow down. Stop saying no to things that stop saying yes to things that you really want to say no to.
Mhm.
Right? Like stop running around. So many of us are spinning our tails up, trying to go above and beyond to meet everybody else's expectations. And we're not actually nourishing ourselves and the things that give us joy. So turn off the hustle, turn on your slow, and you'll see your turn on start to come back. Nourish your body through breath, through food, through hydration, through sleep. This is deeply signaling safety to your body and will move you out of that scarcity of literally not enough because your body is in a deficit to moving into that abundance where your fertility and your libido can come back again. Inviting in more play, as we already said, like just keep that fire going all the time. If you can have more play, more freedom in your body, allow yourself even to move again more. Like I remember that was one of the biggest adaptations that showed up when I was living in purity culture, as I noticed that if I walked with more movement in my body, for example, if I allowed there to be more free flowing movement in my hips specifically, I would start to get judgments or dirty looks or comments from people who are, your youth leaders or the nice little old ladies at church, all that different stuff. So I put my body on lockdown and I really watched the way, even something as simple as I adapted the way that I walked. Right? And so when you can start to bring a little bit more ease, more flow, more movement, keep that fire burning, invite more play into your life, silence that voice in your head that continuously questions, what are people going to think if I do this? What are people think if I wear that? What are people going to think if I listen to this song in the uncensored version, or I walk down the street with a little more sway in my hips, right? Silence those voices. Allow yourself to have a little bit more expression or a lot more expression in your body and presence in your body. Follow those glimmers that create these sparks of joy for your inner child or your inner teenager that wasn't able to show up as their fullest embodied self. This is deeply, deeply healing, right? And deepen that relationship that you have with your body. Everything else hinges on this. We can only go as deep with another person as we've been able to go with ourselves. So know the voice in your body. The more time that you spend in relationship and in connection to that voice in your body, the more you're going to be able to tell what is the voice of intuition and wisdom and what is the voice of fear or trauma, anxiety, scarcity showing up in my body, right? Build up that familiarity by building up your curiosity of wondering where these voices come from, who these voices belong to, and which one is the one that makes you feel like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this thing now, catastrophe. And what is the voice that comes in your body that goes, it's okay, this is meant for us no matter what we do. This is the thing that feels like truth in my body and it grounds me back into the present moment. That's the voice you want to listen to. Notice what you feel in your body through sensation. Like, what is a fuck yes, I want that? And what is a nope, that's not for me? Notice that, and then bring that into embodying your voice so that you can speak these things, right? This is where we move out of where people think, oh, it's just all this free for all. No, it's not. People who are deeply sexually liberated often have very firm boundaries of this is the way that I will be treated and this is the way that I will not accept treatment. And so listen to what and notice what in your body is a fuck yes and what is a hell no, and choose to never again betray yourself for another person's benefit or expectation, because that is only going to lead to self-abandonment, disembodiment, burnout, anxiety, and ultimately resentment, which are such libido killers.
Absolutely. Reminds me what contemplative teacher James Finley says as a sort of a mantra or affirmation where he says, I will not break faith with my own awakening heart.
That's good.
It's just, non-negotiables that create
Yeah.
the boundary at which genuine eros can happen, because there's a certain irreducible mystery that we all are to each other, no matter how much intimacy that we have. And so to like really know ourselves and to feel ourselves enables us to come together in all the ways.
All the ways. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So valuable, Tara. And some of you listening to this could be life-altering paradigm for you if you let it be, to learn to develop a new and more trusting relationship with yourself, with your body, your past, with your potential, and with play. So I want to give you all a couple of practical ways you can go from here if you want to deepen this journey. One, if you happen to be listening to this shortly after it is released, in just a few days, we're going to be exploring these themes at Wisdom Camp at the Wild Goose Festival this year. Our theme is around sacred sexuality and reclaiming our sexuality and sexual expression and relational expression from both religious fundamentalism as well as the zeitgeist of consumer capitalism, and like truly creating a genuinely spiritual, genuinely embodied space of joy and expression and healing. So that'll be Thursday, July 13th from 9 to 5. It's a pre-festival event. If you're already coming to the festival, it's just, $59 add-on. You can also just come to Wisdom Camp if you're not planning to come to the festival. So unfortunately, Tara won't be able to join us. And part of how we connected around this is I wanted her to come out for Wisdom Camp this year, but it's not possible. Certainly hoping to get her out in person in the future.
Yep. Yeah.
Alas. But then also, Tara, could you tell us what are ways people can connect with your work and potentially to even with you if that's possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a number of different ways. I mean, you can find me all across social media at Miss Tara Teng, and that's a great no cost free value. I love I love the beautiful corner of the internet, that this community that I have of just beautiful people who are healing and curious and reclaiming their bodies and taking back their power and coming into their own sexual liberation in alignment with their values, ethics, and beliefs. It's so beautiful. So that's always available to you. You can also find me through my website, tarateng.com. And at any bookstore, anywhere that you find books, I have a new book that was just released a month ago. So this is my US version, Your Body is a Revolution. It's got its own unique cover, and then my Canadian version has its own unique cover as well too. Your Body is a Revolution, Healing Our Relationships with Our Bodies, Each Other, and the Earth. And it is filled with so many practical tips on how to come back into connection with your body. And if you're curious about all the ways maybe that we become disembodied because of the nature of the world that we live in and the systemic body-based oppression that is seeped into our institutions, not just the church, but all throughout our institutions and our society, of how we end up disconnected from these parts of ourselves and not feeling safe enough to fully express the fullness of who we are. Doing so is not just revolutionary, but it is a revolution in and of itself, because your body is a revolution, and there's so much power and wisdom that exists in our body if we just learn how to speak the language of our body and connect back with it. And so at the end of every chapter, I have all kinds of invitations, reflection questions, embodiment exercises, ways for you to take this knowledge that we're talking about both today and in the book and move it out of just your head as something that you understand intellectually, but something that is deep embodied wisdom that you can take with you in your day-to-day. So that's available to you literally everywhere books are sold: Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Indigo, Apple Books, ebooks, and audiobooks. So you can access that there. But if you want to take it even deeper too, I also work one-on-one with folks. And so I'm more than happy to walk with you on your journey of healing and reclamation through one-on-one somatic coaching sessions. If that's something that you're curious about, whether or not it'd be a good fit, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation and offer you that support that I've been so grateful to have for myself in the past, and I feel like we all need at some point in our lives.
Beautiful. So connecting to all things in Tara's universe, tarateng.com, also linked below in the show notes. Please check out her work. And thank you again, Tara. This has been so, so valuable.
So good. Thank you.